Hey everybody, this is Dr. Bill Janeshak on the Conquering Stress podcast, and we're back. So all you listeners know that have been around here or watchers, whichever way you're doing it, that this is about stress. Stress is physical. How you moving around, that can be a stressful thing. It can be chemical. That can be an issue on that. And then what most people think about is emotional or mental stress. As I'm recording this, this is May, and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And I thought it would be a great theme that, since it's on the top of everybody's head, is to have a great conversation with other experts in there. And I have my favorite mental health expert is Dr. Robert Mcdonald, who developed what's called the destination method. He was an early adapter, master, author, guru, superhero of neurolinguistic programming. Probably one of the most well-read people that I've ever known. Has been studying, not just practicing, but is always constantly evolving the thought process, the nuances. And this is one of the things that experts do. They never stop. There's always another question. There's another hill to overcome, so that they continue being experts and asking themselves and other better questions, so that they can do what they do even better than they already have. So, like I said, author, this is the man. He's the guy that travels world round, literally, not some of the bullshit marketing thing that a lot of people say, I'm an international blah blah blah. He's out there doing it and has been doing it for decades. So, without further ado, we're going to bring in the guru of all gurus. Doc, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. You're making me laugh, so I feel better already. It's a good time
Well,
to talk
good.
about stress.
Well, I think so that I'll put us both on the screen. So there. No, it's we always have great conversations, and this is one of the things that I don't have to do is over figure out and go, oh, what questions do I want to ask him? I just ask you what I'm curious about, and when somebody is a true expert and you have all the nuances on it, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to bring you on. Again, we had you
Great.
on a couple of years ago, and I've talked to you several times in the media, but it's nice to have you back because I really do. I have this is mental well health awareness, and when most people think about stress or problems or like that, they go to the emotional stuff, which is your wheelhouse. And my question was, I'm like, is it different now? You're not out of the womb or anything by no means, so you've been
Yeah.
around. But is mental health different, or the challenges, is it bigger and better and worse than it was before, or do we just have more awareness because of social media and
Hmm.
people talking about it?
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting question. What's changed over the years? And I think the good news is that people are aware of mental health and stress, and also people are talking about their own mental health and stress, and people find it relatively comfortable to say, well, gee, I think I need to see a coach or a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or a professional person to help with the stress that I'm experiencing. So I think the good news is in the last 40 years or so, there's been a massive shift from thinking about anyone who would see a mental health practitioner, whatever they call them. Back in the day, no one was a coach. They were psychologists or psychiatrists, or they were marriage and family therapists or some kind of psychotherapy. But coaching has come in because it doesn't require a license to help people deal with things like stress. Of course, they're not psychotherapists, they're coaches, but still, in the day, long ago, 40 years ago, I remember I was in a university setting and was very happy to go to the counseling center there to deal with my emotional upsets from my family of origin, maybe longer ago than 40 years ago. But anyway, uh, I remember I was also working on the campus um, to pay for my education. And somebody I was working with, I mentioned that I was so happy to be able to go to counseling because it was free on the on campus, and saw at least one, maybe more brilliant psychotherapist, and it was free. It was paid for by the university. And I'd mentioned it, and the person I talked to said, "Oh yeah, well I would never do any of that. I take care of my own problems by myself." And I felt a kind of a shaming in that. Was there something wrong if I had to seek assistance, which would never have occurred if I'd broken my leg or my finger or something like that, or cut
Well,
myself.
that was kind of the norm back then,
It
right?
was.
I think that real men just drank it out and beat their kids, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's right. One, one or the other, or both. Uh, yeah, there was such a pressure on, particularly on men. Women were more likely to seek assistance, but men, it was really a very intense anti mental health, even exploration, like what's going on with you. Best thing to do is have a drink, go somewhere, but stop it, just stop it, And so I was aware of that at the time, but I just stayed with it. That's the good news. The good news is that it's talk aboutable. People can talk about it. People can bring it up. People can say, "This is what I'm going through." There, the not such good news is there's so many labels about it, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Everybody seems to know PTSD. It's common language now. People talk about, "Oh, I have post-traumatic stress disorder," or I have may not know that PTSD stands for that, but they'll say I have PTSD, or I have some struggle from my past, and I'm working through it. In the 40 years, there's been no popular way to address these issues that is effective. With the exception, of course, of people who are very well versed in neurolinguistic programming and some cognitive behavioral therapy, but that unfortunately there's a lot of talk without a lot of like ways to resolve these issues, and I mean directly resolve them, like resolve them now. That's very, very
Well,
unusual.
is that's the well, let's just discuss it more. And how do you feel about that? And where there's at the end, they feel better that they talked about it, but
Yeah.
nothing really changed.
Well,
Is
that's right.
is so with we have more stress because post-traumatic stress or back in the day, shell shock
Hmm.
and but we used to that used to be saved for people that went through big trauma. They watched their bunkmate get blown up in Nam, and
Yeah.
they stormed the beaches of Normandy. Now, if you get the wrong color shirt or your pizza's cold, um, are we growing weaker people, or do we have bigger problems, or are we taught that how to not even deal with the small stuff and it becomes big stuff?
Well, I have a sense that in the past we just didn't talk about these kinds of like painful memories. As you say, shell shock was what it was called, like in the First World War, Second World War, Vietnam, Korea, all that stuff was like, okay, shell shock. It was terrible, painful things, but it wasn't considered like you got shell shock because you were upset over something that happened in your life. But now people say, well, I'm upset. And so I'm going to diagnose myself. I mean, PTSD is actually a psychiatric diagnosis. And what's happened with that is people will go in and get what medical people can do. Medical people can either cut something out or they can drug it with a chemical. Non-medical people, psychologists, and so on, will talk to them just as you mentioned. So let's talk about it. That's and it was and still is called let's work through this issue. Quote, work through. What does work through mean? Essentially, talk about it once a week or twice a week for a long, long time.
So you don't
And
feel it's bad about it.
And you may not feel as bad about it because it's been spoken about, and it alters what the problem is that the people who are doing the work of working through don't know what changes. They don't know what actually changes so that the client feels better. They know the client is feeling better because they report it. They say, I'm glad I spoke to you last week, and I had to get that off my chest. I'm so good because nobody else will listen to me, and you do. I really appreciate that you've listened to me. And then the coach or counselor goes, well, great. What I'm doing must work. But the problem that was then, years and years ago, is the problem today. And this is the main problem. There is no definition of the mind that is universally acceptable or acceptable within the world of psychology or mental health. It's called mental health, which means there must be something called the mind. And there is no accepted definition of it. So, therefore, the people who are upset and then they feel somewhat better from talking it over, the one who's helping them to talk it over, they don't know what actually changed. They just know something changed, and the person reports they feel better. Why don't they know what actually changed? Because they don't know what the mind is. I mean, it's not that they are bad people or ignorant, stupid people. They just are untrained. They don't know what the mind is. And most people will say, in the mental health field, will begin to talk about the brain quite readily, that there's a brain problem. Well, I know a great deal about the nomenclature of the brain. It's never helped me to resolve any issue in my life, nor has it ever helped anybody I've known in the work I've been doing for more than 50 years worldwide. If I sit down and say, well, there's a problem of a dysregulated amygdala. Amygdala is a portion of the brain that people presume has something to do with emotional experience. I say, well, it's a dysregulated amygdala. Well, that's never helped. That statement never helps anybody unless a person is being paid to look at a diagram and say, oh, there's the brain, there's the amygdala. Hey, there's the left hemisphere, there's the right hemisphere, there's the corpus callosum, there's the hippocampus, there's the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't help anybody, but when people get involved in mental health, they typically are moved in that direction to talk about the anatomy, neuroanatomy. So, well, why is that? Well, here's the reason why. They don't want to talk or can't talk intelligently or knowledgeably about the mind. Therefore, you're conquering stress, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder or any sort. What is the source of stress? It's like, if not, I don't mean physical stress. Physical stress, we know even iron can have stress. The body can have stress. But when a person talks about personal mental health issues of stress, they're talking about the way they think. That's the source of the stress, is the way I think, what I think about the future, what might happen. What if, what if I'm penniless on the street and homeless? What if my wife leaves me? What if my husband leaves me? What if so and so has an affair? What if there's a never-ending argument? What if our family never gets together again? This produces stress because it's a what if question that has to do with the future. That's where stress will come from. Also, stress will come from people remembering the past, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Remembering the past. If we can, so if we know what the mind is, we can alter the mind on those people who are normally organized, mentally able to pay attention. We can help them alter their minds. Now, what we can't help somebody alter his mind or her mind if the person comes to the meeting and is drunk. Person has to actually be conscious and not drunk. They have to actually be alive and not dead. So there's certain kinds of conditions in which it will tend to work or not work. It tends to work if the person is conscious, then they're alive. And it also tends to be effective if the person wants something. So I've worked with several 100,000 clients worldwide. I've never been able to help anybody who doesn't want me to help them. It doesn't matter how effective I am. I know some of the most powerful tools in the world for assisting people. But if the person says, no, I'm not going to show up and see you because I don't like you or I don't want to do that, I can help them. So having rapport, understanding, a sense of trust is fundamental, and the person's consciousness to be able to report their inner experience. Person says, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I hear this all the time. People diagnose themselves. They give a psychiatric diagnosis without understanding it. They have a very strong opinion about it, and it's called, the opinionated ignorance. So what is the ignorance just means I don't know anything about my mind, and I'm talking with a great opinion about what the mind is. Well, if we know what the mind is, we can make changes. For example, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is actually defined in a very specific way. It is, I still feel bad about an event that happened in my past. It's after the painful event, when I think about it, I feel bad.
Let
That,
me interrupt you for one second because I think I know where you're going with this, and I want to give an interlude about the people listening right now or watching. Is listen very closely because PTSD in the mainstream, like you said before, they can work through it, but they don't really have a resolution.
no.
You have a slight curative rate at 100%.
When
Um,
it when it comes to using the tools for resolving PTSD, yes.
yes, and so anybody that has, I want you guys to listen closely to what he's saying about how the mechanism, how this works, because here's a guy that's actually done this time and time again and repeatedly and in groups and everything, and I've watched him do this several times. So go ahead and continue. I want to make sure everybody they
Sure.
weren't peeing or something and they
Well, they might be going, okay, okay, I'm not going to listen to this guy, but that's all right. I'm accustomed to that kind of thing. When I talk to people, I just go, listen, it's about the mind. And of course, it becomes questionable. What is the mind? And how do we know what the mind is? It's not the brain, absolutely not the brain. And so when somebody has post-traumatic stress disorder, what they do is they have a memory that when they recall it, when they bring the memory to consciousness, they feel upset in some way. They might feel like crying, they might get angry, they might feel like committing suicide. All kinds of things happen when they bring this memory to consciousness. And then some of them say, well, I think it's unconscious. Well, if it's unconscious, they don't know it's even there. So it's a really a moot point. But when a person goes, yeah, I had this terrible event happen, like I've worked with women who've been gang raped and all that, and they come, the terrible event has happened, no doubt about it. Now the question is, how do you feel about it? Well, in order to know how a person feels about having been raped or shot or in a war zone, I work with veterans that had their legs blown off and stuff like that. How do you feel about it when you think about what happened in the past? If the person feels terrible, and they go, I've never been able to sort this out. I'm overwhelmed with it. Well, then the compassionate coach goes, well, gee, I'm sorry you feel terrible about it. It was last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or last week, but you still really feel bad about it. Yes, I do. What can we do? We need to change not the brain, but the memory. The memory is the source of the problem. But if we don't know what a memory is, and I assure you, most mental health professionals don't know what a memory is made of. If we don't know what a memory is made of, we won't know how to change it, nor will we know when it's changed. But a memory is made of mental pictures and sounds and feelings and tastes and smells. That's what it's made of. It's made of representations. And so if I keep remembering when I was, for example, I was raised in an alcoholic family, very verbally abusive. My brother was diagnosed very early on with a serious mental illness, and he was profoundly abusive, verbally, physically, emotionally, mentally. And and so I had to make sure that my memories were healed. Otherwise, I'd still be mad at him and I'd still be upset about it. And I couldn't tell you about it without bringing up the pain. But I don't have that pain over that. And the people I've worked with who've resolved their issues of rape, for instance, they don't feel bad about it anymore. It's not that they have amnesia. They remember fully what happened, but it doesn't hurt them anymore. And so, how is that possible? Their mind has to change. The memory has to change. So, my point is this: back in the old days, we had less discussion. Fewer people were talking about what was happening mentally and emotionally. And it was really unfortunate because we needed so much more. But now we have pretty much everybody. Everybody goes, yeah, I'm really great at this. I know what's going on with me emotionally. I know about my family dynamics and all that. But the problem is that there is no teaching of what the mind is and how it works. So therefore, actual step-by-step predictable change isn't possible unless that knowledge is there. I couldn't help people I went through when I got my bachelor's degree at university and my master of science degree in counseling and mental health. Nobody taught me how to resolve issue, any issue. They taught me history and systems of psychology. I could talk about that. They didn't give me any tools. They didn't teach me what the mind was. So my my blessing in my life when it comes to mental health is I was lucky enough to be trained by the people who created neurolinguistic programming, who understood. They didn't call it the mind. They did talk about the brain. That's right. But I translated it as they're talking about the mind, and because they talked about the elements that make up the mind: mental pictures, sounds, feelings, tastes, and smells. And they said, "Hey, listen, let's change those." And I just love the fact that I went deeply into neurolinguistic programming, very indebted to Richard Bandler, John Grinder, and Steve Andreas, and Connie Ray Andreas, and Robert Dilts, and all the people who created it. Uh, so I'm very glad about that. It gave me an understanding of what the mind is.
So when you were talking before about people would feel better when they were talking about that stuff, those changes were happening, but they could never define it because you could never ask a counselor could never ask a patient, so what changed? And
Exactly.
the patient couldn't ask the counselor, what were you trying to get me to change? Because it just happened and they so it fell into place, but they didn't have that system. They didn't because they couldn't define memories
That's
as
right.
picture sounds and feelings in that you're creating in your head. Then there was nothing to work with. It was just a you throw it up against the wall and see what sticks and just
Yeah, that's it. In a conversation, the person says, "I feel so much better." Well, the coach didn't ask, what is the source of your feeling bad in the first place? So the coach doesn't know how to measure it internally. And then the coach goes, "Oh, you feel better. That's just great. Fine." What I notice is what I'm fully aware of is that in order for the person to have a different emotional experience, their thoughts must change. We must be real clear about this. Emotions and actions come from thoughts. So if there's a hierarchical structure, people want different results in their life. They want to have a different relationship quality. That results that the results they want come from changes in actions and emotions. Actions and emotions come from changes in thinking. Thinking changes come from changes in beliefs. And so if we don't know what beliefs are and we don't know what thoughts are, then we're not going to be able to predictably create change in actions and emotions. So it's to me, it's very, very simple. So because I'm clear that thoughts don't come from the sky, emotions don't come from the sky. Thoughts come by pictures and sounds and feelings. I think about something horrible that happened to me. I fully live in it, and pretty soon my heart's beating. Or let me put it another way, thoughts create chemistry. Now, the weird thing is that every child knows that thought creates chemistry, but the adults and the people in mental health, they don't know that thoughts create chemistry because they don't know what thoughts are. What do I mean by that? Every child knows that if they pretend to eat a lemon, in other words, they imagine a lemon that doesn't exist, they will create saliva in their mouth that wasn't there before. Now, there's no lemon around to say that's the cause of this. The cause is the mind. It is a picture of the lemon, a complete thought of the, I'm getting salivation in my mouth, the thought of the lemon, imagining it squirting, and go, oh, and then chemistry is created by the mind. Every child knows that. It's also true of adrenaline. It's not just saliva. If you actually believe deeply that outside of your office there's a lion ready to come in, your heart rate will increase, your blood pressure will increase, your adrenaline will run through your body, your testosterone will be impacted. Everything, all these chemical things will happen because of your belief which means that you see in your mind's eye this lion out there and you imagine hearing it. And pretty soon, you're all a twitter. You have a lot of stress. The stress comes from the mind. Change the mind, you'll change the stress.
I use analogy a lot of times when I'm teaching a class or something about, we've all had that dream that we're falling backwards naked out of a plane into our 20th year class reunion. And then you wake up in a sweat and your heart is going like that.
Yeah,
He said, all you had was a clear picture in your head and a belief that you were really falling out there. And there was a physiological, you look around your bed. I hope that you're not in your 20th year reunion and you
right.
have clothes on, but
Yeah.
and people go like, oh yeah. And they don't realize they're walking around in that trance. They asked me about hypnosis, and I said, they go, turn me into a chicken and do this. And I said, it's not about doing this. We try to take you out of the trance that you're already in, those
Mm.
beliefs that you have. So
Yeah.
um, it is the picture.
Deliberately change your mind.
So and then you mentioned neurolinguistic programming, and most people when I talk about that, they've never heard of that, but they've heard of EMDR or cognitive behavioral therapy. Those were all
Yeah.
stemmed from NLP, correct?
Well, neurolinguistic programming utilized whatever was apparently effective. Richard and John just looked around what was effective, but EMDR for sure. Francine Shapiro created EMDR many years ago. I happen to have known her long before she died. And she created eye movement desensitization and repatterning or reprocessing. She did this many years ago, wrote a book about it, and many, 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 many psychologists studied her work. And it was about eye movements. It was move the eyes back and forth or up and down or different directions with the intent of addressing things like PTSD. Uh, Now, I think that's a good point, for example, which it came out of neurolinguistic programming. She was involved with NLP. I met her when she and I were very much involved with Richard Bandler. So Francine noticed that the eyes moving back and forth rapidly seemed to be related to the resolution of trauma when doing the NLP trauma process. So she thought that was a really good idea to just do the eye movement. Well, it was a good idea. Unfortunately, it became disconnected from NLP. Not that NLP had to be credited, but NLP had an explanation for what? For this movement changed the person's reaction to the past. They say, "Oh, I've got this really painful memory," and then I just do this eye movement, and wow, I feel somewhat better, if not completely better. Well, the idea was that it was called, what's his name? Whoopi called it a portion of systematic desensitization. Well, that doesn't give us any information. It's just a bunch of labels. What gives us information is this, that when a person has an image in their mind's eye, if I see this person that I remember attacking me, or I remember I'm in a war zone and I see my friend being blown apart. I have that image. When I move the image back and forth rapidly, my eyes go back and forth, back and forth. What happens is that it tends, depending upon the quality of the coach, it tends to then move the image far away and make it smaller. Well, when the image of the terrible event, the mind's memory of it, in other words, the image of, oh, my friend was blown up, I saw him blown. Now I still see it, but it's very, very far away and very small. Then the person goes, "Wow, this EMD stuff, it works, EMD, uh, DR." So I go, "Great, it worked." Well, yes, it does work some of the time. I know a great deal about it, and yes, I use it once in a while because it sometimes is useful. It's not nearly as useful as even the standard NLP trauma process. Now, I happen to create a destination method which has some tweaking of all of that, so it's a much, much better. But nonetheless, even the standard NLP trauma process works vastly better than the EMDR, more predictably effective in getting a result. But EMDR does work from much of the time. And when it does, how do we explain it? We explain it not simply because the person says, I feel better, and not simply because when we put them in an MRI, we notice that less energy is going in one side of the brain and more is going on the other. That's not the explanation. The explanation is the image they were seeing in their mind's eye is farther away. Well, that every child knows that. If I see up close, a child says, "You know, have a lion up close," I'm going to have one reaction. But if I see the same lion, 100 yards away, the other side of a football field, I'm going to feel a completely different way. So the internal representation creates the emotion. This is what needs to be done. Emotions are created by the mind. The mind is made about representations. Change the representation. The classic thing that I like to teach people with is the movie Jaws. Many people remember the movie Jaws, not everybody, but the movie Jaws was about, yeah, it had a little soundtrack that was memorable, but Jaws was about a shark attack on the East Coast. Well, the shark attack was frightening for one reason, because of the size of the shark. There wasn't any other reason. The size of the shark determined that the movie was a horror movie, a scary movie. If we have exactly the same movie, the same dialogue, the same scenes, but the shark is the size of a minnow, well, then it'll be a comedy. It's that simple. Change the representation from a gigantic, overwhelmingly large shark to one the size of a minnow, and we no longer have any fear. We no longer upset. It's no longer a scary movie. It's a comedy. So our minds present certain images in certain sizes and shapes and distance and color and black and white and all that. Change that and change the emotional life in the twinkling of an eye. In the twinkling of an eye, it can be done. So it depends on what people are actually interested in. Now, I happen to be committed to the resolution of unnecessary suffering. And that, therefore, I go, okay, you have this suffering. If there's a way to help you, I'll find out. And if you want it and you actually feel safe enough to do what I ask you to do, it will, you're pretty assured of getting what it is that you want. Now, I'm not just interested in the resolution of human suffering as though other people suffer and I don't. I'm interested in the resolution of human suffering, my own, other people's, the societal stuff. So that brings a moral question that NLP never answered, and that's the reason why I had to transcend it. And the moral question is this: if we want to resolve suffering, there's the most effective thing to do to resolve suffering is to kill the client. Client will be dead; they will no longer have suffering. And so everybody knows that. NLP prides itself on saying we don't care what's right and wrong. We're just interested in what works. Yes, I can tell you what works to make sure the person no longer suffers. Kill the client. And
Well,
then,
this is recorded, so this is going to be out there, and they're going to say, you know what, Dr. McDonald's, he can take care of it just by killing the
just
patient.
kill the client. It's just that when I ask the people who are committed to the utilitarian answer, just do what works, uh, are you really to do that? They'll say no. And then I say, why aren't you? And the reason why people are not committed to killing each client and every client forces them to attend to a morality within them. They'll go, no, that's not right. They can say it's not effective for the society. Society works better. But underneath that is it's wrong. I'm not going to do that. It crosses my boundaries. No, I'm not. No, I personally would feel bad, even though the other person is no longer suffering. I would feel bad, and I go, no, I'm not going to enter into that, and nor do I want the world to be a world in which we kill the clients in order to make them feel better. So morality does come up, at least it does in my life, and I call it morality. We could call it ethics. We can call it better judgment. We can call it everything we want. But why not kill the client? And so for me, it's quite clear. I don't do that. What I'm interested in is not killing the client, but helping the client to change their thinking, which will mean they'll no longer be upset.
Well, so I want to take the listeners back to what I was talking about at the beginning when I was introducing you, is that you are constantly studying and reviewing and taking this, and this is how greatness happens. So Robert McDonald doesn't have, he has 40 years plus experience in doing what he does. He doesn't have 1 year 40 times. He's not doing the same thing because he learned this thing and he's just doing that same thing. And what happens with all great innovations is that once you've mastered something, you have now the wherewithal and the mental to ask another question. How can I make this even better than it was before? Where NLP didn't have the ethical portion of it, and the destination method that you created engages that makes this therapy even better.
I think so.
Well, it's standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
Ford introduced the the vehicle.
Right.
Well, if we wouldn't have had other people that mastered his vehicle, we wouldn't have Teslas and
Exactly.
Mercedes and Rolls Royces today.
Right.
And it's very rare that we find people that continue to just another version. What's better? We can always make this better.
Sure. But let's
And
not lose sight of the giants. That's true.
yeah, I mean, we
NLP,
couldn't have got there without them, but there's a
absolutely.
point that we want to go on. And people listening, you might have done really good with your coach or your therapist, and you need another iteration that they haven't gotten yet or don't know about. So
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that people are understanding that that the stuff that you're talking about is not just theory, but
No.
your whole everything that you do is about, screw the theory. What's the result?
Yeah. And how do we get there?
Yeah, and the systematic thing and the art form is that you know that we just have to take their pictures and their memories and like that, and what's the the movements or the portions of these pictures that they're getting, because when he says twinkling of an eye, it's it happens immediately.
Yeah, it's true.
And you see these collapses and they'll say, well, that couldn't happen with me because I've had this for 50 years and like that, and I've been working on it for 50 years. No, you've been doing the same thing over and over until you get to the point, and then
Hmm.
it collapses right away. There's not a choice. You don't ease into it. You change or you don't change, right?
If I, that's right. Change the representation or not change the representation. But a lot of people, but of course, everybody has what in the olden days used to be called secondary gain, which is there's a positive intention for my continuing to smoke cigarettes, or there's a positive intention for my continuing to be angry with somebody, or grieving over the loss of a loved one. Grief is, of course, powerful. Everybody who lives long enough grieves as long as they're able to love. They're able to love and they live long enough. They go into grief because somebody dies or something that they've had is gone. We go, well, can we resolve that? Well, yes, I happen to have been deeply involved. I wrote my master's thesis actually on grief. And then I found out exactly what it was because Steve and kind of Andreas explored it from an NLP perspective. And I didn't know what NLP, I didn't know what grief was until it was taken apart into the modalities and submodalities that make it up. Once I got that, then I've been working with people around the world for 50 years and helping them to resolve grief. But not everybody wants to. My point was not everybody wants to resolve grief. They may have strong objections to getting better. They'll go, no, if I no longer feel bad over the loss of my mother, father, sister, brother, husband, wife, doesn't that mean I didn't love them, or doesn't that mean there's something wrong with me? And so they say, no, I really want to keep this pain. It's a sacred wound, and that's perfectly okay with me. I don't tell people you gotta resolve it. What I do is tell people if they want to resolve it, I can help them so that they can think about their loved one and not experience grief, experience the fullness of their presence. That can be done by the alteration of the mind. uh, many people will refuse that invitation because they haven't allowed themselves to notice they have a very good reason for keeping the grief. It's a good reason. They want to maintain an idea that they're a good person and to maintain the idea that they love the person who passed away, and that's quite reasonable. What they don't know is that they can do both. They can know that they're a good person, continue to experience that they love the person who passed away, and they can feel perfectly free of all grief. That can be done. And I've done it. I've done it with individuals, I've done it in groups, I've done it with thousands of people. So it is quite possible to resolve these issues. We have to make sure that the person feels safe enough to explore it and that they ultimately they say, yes, I want to. And then they address their own internal objections to having what they want. In the olden days, people would call objections sabotage. I'm here to say there's nothing really about, there's no such thing as self-sabotage. What it is their internal, some part of me wants me to keep things the way they are for very good reasons. So a deep knowledge is that there's no such thing as an inner enemy. We only have inner friends. This is a deep understanding that every single part of us is actively in love with us. Well, if we have this idea that I have many different parts of me, but all parts of me are actively in love with me, then I don't experience self-sabotage. I don't experience those kinds of. What I do is I just find out what's the positive intention of this part that keeps insisting that I hold a grudge or insisting that I remain in grief. And I don't beat it up. There's no point in having an internal war. It just leads to more war. You can't wash off blood with blood. We need to do something that transforms our minds. And the transformation of the mind is precisely what the destination method is all about. And I would claim that's exactly what NLP is all about. It's like, let's change the mind. I just happen to like it to have a moral character to it, but let's change it.
Well, the other interesting thing is, this is conquering stress is because that's what people say. Ultimately, everything comes down to stress. It's your body's
Yeah.
overwhelmed by dealing with something or they're dealing with it inappropriately, and it
Hmm.
builds and builds and builds and becomes improper. And my contention is you take the same physical, chemical, and emotional thing that have caused damage to you physically, chemically, or emotionally, and you learn to master those into a sense and use them as your superpower. It also makes the person an optimum liver, meaning that they can optimize their physical health
Yeah.
and their digestion and how the mind works. Um, so in that context, it's the same thing. Once you learn how to think, you can think yourself out or control yourself out by using those meta programs and those little pieces of memory, and you can create a vision for that as well. Is that
Sure.
right?
Yeah. And of course, I mean, if it weren't for the stress that comes from lifting weights, we wouldn't increase our physical strength. So, stress within a certain tolerance is actually necessary for our health. We need a certain amount of stress. It's when the stress is overwhelming that it breaks us or tends to move in the direction of breaking us rather than helping us to build. And mental stress is I have all this stress because of what I'm thinking about the future or thinking about the past. And if I can alter what I'm thinking or how I'm thinking about this future and the past, how I'm thinking about relationships, how I'm thinking about whatever it is I'm thinking about, then my stress will evaporate. I can change that. It is quite doable. And and it's also doable to do it not only with changing representations directly, but indirectly. We can change our blood pressure, for example. For many years, people didn't do that. They didn't change their blood pressure with thought. They went up. I got high blood pressure. That's the end.
Mhm.
Instead of sitting down, breathing deeply, and calming their body and changing their mental representations, and then their blood pressure goes down significantly.
Yes.
It can be done by anybody. But it shows me that the body responds to the mind. I actually believe that the body is created by the mind, but that's another story altogether. But typically, what it is people think there's the body, and then that creates the mind and emotions and stuff. But I have another idea. But whatever the idea is, certainly, if I change my thinking, I'll change my emotional life. That is certainly the truth, which is not a new idea, by the way. It's not a new idea. In the 1920s, Ernest Holmes, who created the science of mind, which is now called Centers for Spiritual Living, made an entire religion out of it. Change your thinking, change your life. He just didn't know what the mind was to help that along, but it was a spiritual understanding. It was true. Change your thinking, change your life. If
Well, that's in the, the Bible as well, and it's in Stoicism, and it's in
yeah,
Buddhism, and it's everything else. So it's a universal thing. There was never well, how do you do that? Think
exactly.
positive. Well, I can't because I'm really pissed off right
That's right.
and well, how do well, I just am. Well, and if the questions were never asked, I remember when I was introduced to neuro linguistic programming, I went, well, that makes sense. I'm like, but it couldn't be that easy. And then, I think I got rid of corn chips,
Yeah.
and I did the thing, and immediately I went, wow, that worked. And proof and proof again, it just shows. But we're never taught how to change your mind, or how to think. And and every time I'll see a seminar or a book or something, it says, how to think, and it never it tells you what to think.
That's right.
And they never, and so until NLP, and then now with it upgraded of the destination method, uh, this is actually the instruction manual for changing it.
Well, I
So
think the key is coming to an actual definition of the mind. If we have an operational definition of the mind, we're in good shape. The problem in the world of mental health is that if we go into any university in the world that teaches people to get PhDs, bachelor's degrees, master's degree, PhDs, doctorates of psychology, and we ask the head of the psychology department, "What are you studying?" There's going to be a big struggle and a fight. They'll go, well, maybe they're studying behavior, maybe they're studying cognition, uh, maybe they're studying this, studying that. And it's psychology means the study or science of the soul. It originally meant soul, psyche. But let's say the study or science of the mind. Well, what is the mind? If we're going to study it, what is it? And when there's no answer to this question, other than, well, it's behavior. No, the mind is not behavior. Well, it's cognition. Well, cognition is just a big word that people use for thinking. What are you doing when you're thinking? What are you doing? And this was long before NLP. Well, back when Freud became extremely popular in the United States around the year 1900, he had written the Interpretation of Dreams, which was super popular among the intelligentsia of the world. People became just enamored with his talking about how people were dealing with their emotional issues similar to Greek tragedies, such as Oedipus Rex. And he had stories that he told people. And people went, wow, that's really fascinating. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe that's why it is the way it is. And then what happened after that is cognitive, that began to fade out. And people said, well, what about actual something we can measure? And so they got into behaviorism with B.F. Skinner, and B.F. Skinner went, let's just measure what people do. Let's not notice anything about what we can't notice, which is their mind. We can't see the mind anywhere, so I can't look in your head and find the mind. In fact, if I look in your head, I'll find a brain. That's it. There is no mind there. So they go, let's ignore all that. He actually came to write a book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity because he wasn't interested in freedom and dignity in this way. It was all behavior. Somebody does something, you can reward them for doing it. And then it came to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like really well rehearsed, researched. You go, yeah, great. It's just that What is happening? What is the mind? What is it? And without that definition, I think everything becomes debatable. But once the mind is defined, it's not debatable. The mind literally is mental pictures and sounds and feelings and tastes and smells. In other words, representations. My representation of my mother and father is not my mother and father, but my emotional reactions are to the representations, not to my mother and father. Even if my mother and father were alive today, I'm still responding to my mental representation. So if the mind, the representations, inner pictures, for example, that's what creates the emotional life. If so, I go, well, in that case, let's pay attention to changing the emotional life by changing the thoughts. It's extremely simple, but where the culture, the whole, it's not just this American culture, the entire world has a really difficult time with that. You thought it was maybe too simple. Well, I go, well, does it work? If it works, that's great. What is it? Let's narrow it down. What exactly is it that changes? So I keep seeing my brother about to hit me in the face, and I'm upset about it, upset about it. And then I see that image far away. I'm not upset about it. Well, I changed what? I changed the image, the distance that I see it, the size of it. Perhaps I changed the color of it from color to black and white. And my emotional life is dramatically changed in a few minutes. Now, why won't that happen every time with people who are listening? Because it takes a great deal of attention and agreement that it's okay to do that. And I mean, okay, I mean permissible, that it's all, I'm not going to be harmed by doing that. I'm not going to be a bad person because I feel better. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with finances. Many people are convinced that rich people are bad and poor people are good. That conviction is a belief. That belief is made of thoughts. Organized thoughts make up beliefs, and organized thoughts are made of what? Pictures and sounds and feelings. So if we change the thoughts, we'll change the belief. We change the belief, and the person can then say, well, maybe it's all right for me to make more money. Many people go, no, I'm not going to make more money because I don't want to join the club of those bad people. So, okay, well then don't join that club and don't change your behavior, or notice that the source of your problem with finances is your mind. Alter that and you can alter. It's like having Aladdin's lamp. I oftentimes talk about this in my trainings and teaching. What do we think about a person who owns the real Aladdin's lamp and keeps it in his garage and never looks at it? That's the current state of events. That's what the way. This is the state of the world. Each of us who's talking about this, listening to this, you own the real Aladdin's lamp. It's your mind. Just keep it in the garage and never look at it, never try it out, never get to know it, don't know what it does. You won't be able to get the benefits of it. So, this is to me, why would that be the case? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons why people don't make life better for themselves. But the source of change is changing the mind, always and invariably.
No, and that's why I wanted to have you on because sometimes we make complicated things that we don't understand. It's a bigger problem that we know. And I'm a big fan of first principles.
Yeah.
You got to wake up in the morning and breathe.
Hey, I
Yeah.
like that part.
And you keep going first principles. First principles is like you said, nobody's ever defined a thought. Nobody was ever taught how to think. If you take a kid and you say, okay, does this upset you? Okay, let's talk about pictures. If I grew up with that uh, philosophy and knowing that I was actually in control of my thoughts and that, but when we're young, it's more Skinner. It's cause and effect, or it's Pavlovian.
Hmm.
And so we get caught up in this thing, and we never stop to answer the question about why. So I'm gonna respect your time, but I want well, I guess it doesn't matter what I want. Uh, but I know that there's people they're gonna go because every time we talk, people do the same thing. Go, that was amazing. Who was that guy, and what did he do? Where can people reach out to you that want to resolve stuff or they have questions, or even I know that tons of people coaches and therapists and doctors and stuff want to do train with the destination
Yeah.
method. How
Yeah.
can they reach you?
Well, one, if they're really, really courageous, they can call me on the telephone, but that seems to be old school. But if they have deep courage, they can call me at 714-577-5717 if they want to actually talk to me. But Uh, please don't text me. Texting me means that it requires I have to text back, and the deep questions can't be done that way, answered that way. So people can call me. They can email me at robert@teloscenter.com. That's Telos is Telos, Telos. Telos is the Greek word for the ultimate goal of all goals. So what that would be in human beings, according to Aristotle, would be happiness. So it's Robert at Telos Center, CENTER.com, teloscenter.com. They could email me, or they could go to my website, teloscenter.com. I own the Telos Healing Center, and it's at www.teloscenter.com. And then they could look up, for example, upcoming events. I happen to have an event in September called Precision Listening, which is professional level listening skills. People who really want to know the most important communication skill. There are three fundamental communication skills. One is yes, the other one's no, and the other one is let go. Yes, no, and let go. Those are the three most important communication skills. Yes, to let in that which I think is nourishing, no, to keep out that which I think is toxic, and to let go of old hurts and pains and so on. So that's like assertion, empathy, and forgiveness. Well, empathy is based on the ability to listen well. Recently, we had somebody say that the world's problem is caused by empathy. Well, actually, there's no civilization unless we have empathy. Empathy is the foundation of civilization. And that's taught by women. Mothers teach their children. They say, "Don't hit Johnny. How would you like it if Johnny hit you?" Suddenly, we move into the world of empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of another person. But to listen is to foster that. And so the listening class, it's professional level listening, precision listening, and storytelling to work with children and adults, and core belief change. So in a 6-day program, they get trained, really trained on how to do these things. Now, if I could teach the world one tool, one, I happen to know many, many, many thousands of tools. But if I could teach the world one thing to do that would help the entire world dramatically overnight, it would be teach people how to listen. What everybody thinks they know how to listen. Oh, I heard you, but they don't know how to listen at a deep level, certainly not at a professional level. Precision listening requires effort. No, no work at it, no success at it. It's really simple. So, listening is part of the 6-day program in September, September 23rd to the 28th. And if they want to, they can join this training. They can learn how to listen at the deepest possible levels. They can learn how to work with children and adults to help them change themselves and others through storytelling and therapeutic metaphors, and also how to elicit and transform core beliefs. All that's going to happen in 6 days. It's a real training.
It's amazing, and I've heard you and I've watched you train and teach, and by this time, just listening to Robert as he goes through everything for the people that want the mastery, and we started out talking about what's a thought and what's everything else. So this is the place that you go when you want more than just surface level stuff. When you're going to dive deep in, that's what we're going to do. So, dude, thanks for coming out. I'm gonna we're gonna go out, and I want you guys to get this out and share this. I put these things out, and I had to have these conversations because a lot of times these are the conversations that we have whenever we're together, and I always pull out mastery, and a master can take the insanely difficult and make it simple, and then that's the superpower. So when we're talking about mental health is learn how to think and learn how to listen. So If you know
Well,
anybody that's struggling, you go back out over there and just have them go off and share this, and they have all the contact for Robert. And this is a Conquering Stress podcast. So,
and I hope they come to see you for because you make chiropractic and all the physical things simple. The best chiropractor that have ever seen. I'm so very happy. I go, Lizette, my wife and I, we go and we see Dr. Bill. And so we recommend whoever's listening to this, if you don't already know it, we're very lucky to have Dr. Bill Janeshak here in Southern California because go there. I know I'm being well taken care of because he knows what he's doing. It's no pretense, and I'm very glad about that. So I have to say those things, Bill, whether you like it or not.
well, I thank you very much. That's the
The
way we
truth.
go. So here we go. We're both excellent guys, and hang out with us and just follow. It's the answers are there. We're just here to bring them to you.
Let's
Peace.
do it. I look forward to more. So great talking with you. Thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye bye.